Hi everyone, here's your do now for today. Dr. Pompilio gave all students at Central High School a survey to fill out regarding their favorite subject. Dr. Pompilio then randomly chose 3 classes surveys to review. Identify the sample and the population in the given scenario. So what I want you to do is pause the video, give this a try. Remember, these are some vocabulary words that were in your lesson on the crossword puzzle. So if you need to, take that out to review some of your definitions before you start this lesson. So hopefully you were able to identify the sample as the 3 classes. And the population as all students at Central High School. It's important that when you are identifying things like population, use the word all. Or if they give you a specific number, you want to use how many, okay? So our target for today is at the end of 42 minutes, I can answer questions using my knowledge of statistics vocabulary. So like I said in the do now, these are all going to be words that you should be familiar with from your web quest and your crossword puzzle in the previous lesson. So population, the entire set of objects for which there is an interest in obtaining information about, and sample, a smaller part of the population for which information or data is gathered in order to generalize about the population. So usually we don't work with our populations. We can't survey a population or do an experiment on a population. It's just not plausible. So therefore, we find a sample. We want to make sure it's a good sample. And then we use the results from that sample to generalize to our population. So let's take a look at our practice questions. For each of the following, does the group described constitute a population or a sample? Or could it be considered to be either a population or a sample? Explain your answer. A, the animals that live in Yellowstone National Park. So hopefully you realize that this should be a population because it's all animals and not just birds, let's say. I would argue, or I would allow you to argue, as long as you have proper justification, that this could be considered a sample. And it's a sample because it is only the animals in Yellowstone Park, not the animals in all parks across the country. So that would be a good justification as well. Some of these you're going to be able to argue for either population or sample. It's just important that you back up what you're saying and you explain it. B, every 5th person who enters the school is asked to answer a survey. This should be a sample because it is not all students. That one is definitely a sample. It can't really be argued. C, the colors of pencils available in a 36 count packet of Crayola colored pencils. Hopefully you recognize this as a population because it is all the pencils in the package and not just the blue or just the red. Here's another one where you could argue that this is a sample because it is only 36 colors and Crayola offers many more than 36 colors. D, the students from your school who watched your school's lacrosse team play yesterday. I would say this is a sample, whoops, a sample because it is not all the students at the school. And then lastly, part E, you get the statistics for points scored by Steph Curry based on his last 7 games played. This should be a sample because it is only 7 games, not the entire season. So what makes a sample a bad sample? A biased sample is one outcome is more favored than others. So bias is unfair. So how do we design a good sample? While designing an unbiased random sample, we want to choose participants by impersonal chance. So I want to have a good representative sample, which is if a sample is taken for the purpose of generalizing to a population, the sample must be representative of the population. In other words, it must be similar to the population even though it is smaller than the population. So for example, if I want to take a representative sample of Central High School, I want to make sure that I have both male and female. I have 10th graders, 11th graders, and 12th graders. I want to have some athletes, some people in the performing arts. I don't want it to all be males or all be 11th graders. Okay, so we want our sample to be representative of our population. And a good way to do this is by taking a random sample. A random sample is a sample whose members are chosen at random from a given population in such a way that the chance of obtaining any particular sample can be computed. So that means that everyone has the same probability of being chosen. And one method of random sampling is a systematic random sample. And this is a procedure for sampling a population in which a predetermined number is chosen and used to sample every nth person in the population. So I want to choose every 5th person that walks in the door to a grocery store, or every 3rd person that walks in Central in the morning, something like that. So moving on to our practice questions. A survey is to be conducted in a small upstate village to determine whether or not local residents should fund construction of a skateboard park by raising taxes. Which segment of the population would provide the most unbiased responses? So I'm looking for it to be the most fair. Take a minute, see if you can figure out the answer. So hopefully you chose choice 4. A club of local skateboard enthusiasts would not be a good sample because I'm talking about building a skateboard park, so they would be more so in favor than others. Senior citizens living on fixed incomes, they would not want their taxes to be increased for something that they're not going to use. And a group opposed to any increase in taxes, they're obviously not going to want to build a skateboard park. Every 10th person 18 years of age or older walking down Main Street, that's good because I'm taking every 10th person, so that's a systematic random sample. Number 2, Chuck's Trucking Company has decided to initiate an Employee of the Month program. To determine the recipient, they put the following sign on the back of each truck. The driver who receives the highest number of positive comments will win the recognition. Explain one statistical bias in this data collection method. So we want to talk about one reason why it's unfair. There are a few here, okay? So the problem, well, one problem is that you have to call in. So that means it's voluntary. And voluntary response is never a good type of survey. So you could say that people need to call in So they probably won't be likely to call in unless it's a negative comment. Think about it. You see these signs all the time. Do you pick up the phone and call every time to compliment someone? No, probably not. So I have people need to call in, so they are probably more likely to call in with complaints instead of positive comments. You only have to write one explanation here or one reason. But you, instead of this, you could have talked about perhaps the driver is bribing people, or the driver is having their family and friends call in so they get more positive comments. What I'd like you to do right now is try numbers 3 and 4 on your own. Pause the video and read through them, give each of them a try, and then hit play when you're ready to start again. So for number 3, hopefully you chose choice 3. From calls made to 100 randomly generated telephone numbers, people replied to a question about television shows they watch. Okay, we have randomly generated, that's good. And what we're sampling about is not having an effect on how we're choosing the sample. And what I mean by that is if we look at number 4, it says that I'm surveying people who leave the World of Baseball bookstore about baseball. Okay, so that's a conflict of interest there. They're going to be more favorable or less favorable based on where you're surveying them from. Similar to answer choice 2, you're asking country and Western radio station listeners about rap music. Okay, so if they're listening to country or Western radio, chances are they don't like rap music. Okay, and then number 4, we were looking for the most unbiased random sample here. Hopefully you chose choice 3 again. Choice 1 was bad because I'm surveying teenagers leaving a movie theater about entertainment. That's a conflict of interest. Choice 2, this goes back to that telephone question. People have to voluntarily respond to an ad in the newspaper, and that's never a good option. And then choice 4, there's a conflict of interest once again. People who are taking an honors class, chances are they spend more time doing homework than people who are not. Okay, now we're moving on to the types of studies that can be conducted. There were 3 different things that we looked at, or that you should have looked at in your web quest: an observational study, a survey, and an experiment. An observational study is something where you're just sitting back and observing or watching what happens. You are not interfering with it at all. A survey is a type of observational study, but it's specific when you're just asking questions. An experiment is the key one here. An experiment has to have a few different components. They have to have different groups and treatments. That's important. And typically we have a treatment group and a control group. We don't have to, but we usually do. And the other thing that I'd like you to add here is there is usually some kind of randomization process in how you assign people to either the treatment group or the control group. So treatment group and control group were 2 other vocabulary words, as well as placebo. The placebo is usually given to the control group. It's a dummy pill. So for example, if I was testing aspirin, one group would get aspirin and one group would get a placebo or a sugar pill. That does not always need to be the case. If I was testing your heart rate, one group could be the treatment group and they had to run a mile. The other group would be the control group and they're not running a mile. Something like that is also possible. Your control group does not have to actually receive medicine, neither does your treatment group. We typically think of treatment as medicine, but it doesn't have to be. The treatment can be the sun affecting the plants, and my control would be the shade. It could be exercise, like I just said. There's different things. It's not necessarily a pill or a medication for a treatment group. So let's take a look at our practice problems. Pause the video, try numbers 1 and 2, and then when you're ready, hit play to check your answers. So number 1, which investigation technique is most often used to determine if a single variable has an impact on a given population? Impact is similar to cause and effect. The only thing that can prove cause and effect is a controlled experiment. So hopefully you chose choice 3. Number 2, a school cafeteria has 5 different lunch periods. The cafeteria staff wants to find out which items on the menu are most popular, so they give every student in the first lunch period a list of questions to answer in order to collect data to represent the school. Which type of study does this represent? If I'm giving them a list of questions, I know it has to be some kind of survey. So I'm crossing off choices 1 and 2. I am only sampling the first lunch period, not all of them. So it is a sample, not a population. Hopefully you chose choice 4. Once again, I'd like you to pause the video and give numbers 3 and 4 a try, and then hit play to check your answers. Number 3, a sociologist reviews randomly selected surveillance videos from a public park over a period of several years and records the amount of time people spend on a smartphone. The statistical procedure the sociologist used is called, they're simply reviewing and looking at and observing the amount of time people spend on a smartphone, so it is choice 3, an observational study. Number 4, which statement about statistical analysis is false? Hopefully you chose choice 3. Observational studies can determine cause and effect relationships. The only thing that can determine a cause and effect relationship is an experiment. Not a survey, not an observational study, has to be a controlled experiment. And lastly, let's take a look at number 5 together. Describe how a controlled experiment can be created to examine the effect of ingredient X in a toothpaste. So if I'm looking for a controlled experiment, I want 2 things. I want a treatment and a control, and I want randomization. So you want to be as specific as possible. So you want to put some numbers in here. You don't have to. You could just say sample a certain population and divide them into groups, but I'm going to be specific. So I'm going to say select 100 participants and randomly assign them to 2 groups of 50. Give one group a toothpaste with ingredient X, and the other group a toothpaste without ingredient X. And then you're going to compare the results. So you do not have to have what I have word for word. It's just an example. You could obviously use different numbers. You could refer to the control group as the group without ingredient X. Um, but you want to hit those two key parts, treatment and control, and randomization. So you have the mixed practice problems to work on. You're going to work on those problems and then submit your answers on the form when you're done. Remember to refer back not only to this video, but to your definitions and the crossword puzzle that you did in the previous lesson with all of these important vocabulary words.